Hi, my name is Marnie Maraldo, and I'm the president of the Issaquah School Board, and I am in my 16th year on the board.
And I'm Sydne Mullings, and this is my 6th year on the school board.
And we're doing a group of podcasts to help our public really understand what it is that the school board does. There's so many complex issues, and sometimes you need a deep dive into what those issues are. So that's what we're hoping to do.
And we've gotten a number of questions. We get them through email, our thought exchange, and some of our town hall in-person meetings. So we thought it would be good opportunities for us to get together and answer them here and share them with the broader community.
Great. So the job of the board is to look at long-term and planning and immediate needs. So today we're going to talk about how we use facilities and kind of our plans for the new high school and why it is that we feel we need a new high school. So one of the things is enrollment drives so much of our work. It drives the revenue that we receive, and it also just drives how we plan for our facilities and long-term growth. So we do this so that we can maintain the great district that we have. We have great student achievement. The percentage of our students that graduate go on to into the workforce, onto a 2 or 4 year college or into the trades. And that's really important for us to be able to maintain that quality education that the public really expects from us. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions is, how do you plan for student enrollment growth? One of the things is we make enrollment projections. And in fact, we had an outside demographer come in and take a look at what our student growth was going to be over time. Now, historically, we've had very high growth at all levels. When I started in the district 16 years ago, we were about 14,000 students, and now we're rounding up to about 19,000 students. So there's been a lot of growth over all levels. And that's still actually happening at our high school levels. So while young families may find it harder to move into our districts, and we might see some drop in enrollment around the elementary age, by the time they get to high school, the families are moving in specifically for our schools and for the education that they know we're going to get at the high school level. So the expectations are that by 2035, we will be well over 6,000 high school students, whereas back when we started looking at the potential of a 4th high school, it was just under 5,000. So changing needs, it's clear that there's changing needs for us. The other thing is that education has changed a lot over the past several years. What we expect to provide for students, especially a focus on career training, means that we need more space to be able to do that. We need flexibility of our spaces, both indoors and outdoors. And right now, we have no flexibility in our spaces. We are over capacity at all 3 high schools. And if we're over capacity now, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you talk about the capacity that we need in our schools. And it is very different at the different levels of schools. I think if you look at our elementary schools, when kids are that age, it's a much more structured day. It's a much more structured interaction with their teacher. And so the blueprint, if you will, of a school is pretty set. And we have a lot of elementary schools. And if you look at like specific needs, pre-K students, they need bathrooms inside of their rooms where we don't need that in other buildings at other levels. When you get into middle school, that's when we have students starting to branch out a little bit. We're trying to use the space to support their growing independence and to support their growing exploration. And so we find at middle, we're starting to change the construct of what's in our buildings. We're also bringing students in from multiple of our elementary schools to create a larger community. So our middle schools are growing, they're full, but they also have a richer array of activities and a more variable blueprint of what kind of classes kids are able to take. And then when you go on to high school, that goes up even more, right? Our multiple middle schools are coming into our 3 high schools. Those numbers, as you mentioned, are going up because we have people joining our district at the high school level. And our need for flexibility goes up to our maximum state, right? We're looking at the variability of student choice. We're looking at the different requirements, maybe at different paces that our students are taking on their requirements. We certainly have a larger set of activities going on and a different design of programs. So when we talk about capacity, the calculation very much changes across the types of age and building and independence. Choice plays in, and acceleration. We have so many of our students who are very accelerated. So we have students in our middle schools taking high school courses. We have students in our high schools taking college courses. So we just look at that need for flexibility really growing and growing.
So Sydne, the new high school. I have feelings. Do you have feelings?
I have a lot of feelings.
I'm sure the community has feelings. But I wanted to talk about just the challenges of available land. And I have a prop. Look at this stack, stacks on stacks. These are all the locations that the school district looked at to see if we could come up with a conglomeration of land that we could build on. Some of it might have required us to do eminent domaining of housing, or taking over certain sites, and there just was nothing available. Part of that has to do with something called the urban growth boundary that a lot of people don't understand. And as a way of protecting all the green spaces we have here in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State has an urban growth act that kind of rules where you can build so that we can protect those green spaces. So part of that means it then limits where we can build schools. Right. So that has been one big limitation. Another is that how we can get property to link together and get enough of it to build something as large as a high school with adequate facilities for that space and adequate parking. And if you go to Issaquah High, you know parking is an issue. And the other thing that has really impacted historically the new high school is all of the legal delays that we've had. So initially, we had to do an eminent domain of the property. We did have a willing seller in that space, but it had a beautiful church on it. Actually, it was a former college, and it received a historical landmark designation that the church that owned the property then had to fight to allow them to sell the property to us. So that was one legal battle. The next one then became the environmental impact of building on that site. Then we had to actually zone it because it wasn't zoned for a facility for a school to be able to use. And then finally was the use permit process, which then invited the environmental impact again. And so all of those, we received some difficulties, the legal delays related to that. You know, for each of those processes, the city councils need to approve those. And we're not just dealing with one city, we're dealing with both the city of Issaquah for the property and the city of Sammamish for the roadway that is in front of that we're going to have to improve in order to be able to have great traffic. So right now we have that use permit. We've gone through all of that. The property is shovel ready, but that permit expires in April. So if we don't start building on it in April, we will have to go through that environmental impact and use permit process again, which will then put a bigger delay to the process.
Yeah, and a bigger delay means more cost. I think it's important to talk about the cost side of this. So when this first was envisioned of a new high school, when we knew we were already over capacity back in 2015 and then a 2016 ballot initiative, at that time the estimate to build the new high school was about $120 million. That current estimate has escalated over the ensuing years to $293 million. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You talked beautifully about the time and the impact of multiple steps in the process, but there's also just pure math. Prior to COVID, when you looked at the standard escalation cost for building, very stable and predictable, and somewhere around 3, maybe 6% that you could plan for. In 2020 to 2021 alone, we saw a spike of over 20% in that escalation. It's really been astronomical. And so we've had to come back and recalculate the cost for building this new high school. So we've got construction costs that have inflated, as I mentioned. We've got updates to the environmental requirements, as you mentioned, so to make sure we're in line with all of the proper environmental requirements. We also have the matter of improving the roadway on 228th to ensure we have good flow of traffic and access to the new school site and to get through that area, and then the addition of legal costs. And so the cost has changed significantly over the years, and that is why the district is seeking a new ballot initiative to help complete the payment of the school. The funds from the previous ballot initiatives are in reserve and ready to be used, and now it's the matter of completing that cost given some of these escalations.
So I think some people have told us it's fine. We can just keep things the way they are. But what are the true impacts of maintaining the status quo?
Exactly.
And so I've been thinking through those. One is the reduction in quality of our education. You'll have larger class sizes because there's only so many rooms. There's actually no more room for portables. So that means that we're not going to be able to provide the same level of experience that students are getting. There will be increased challenges in student behavior because of the tight spaces that they're in. More students in a classroom. That means more are being jam-packed in there. There's going to be more expenses because we're going to have to provide additional supports to students. One that I'm really worried about is a decrease in student involvement, right? You can only have one class president. You can only have so many students on a basketball team. So what happens to students who want to get involved and there's just not enough room? So some of those things are kind of the risks of maintaining where we're at today, because although our buildings are going to remain the same size, the student population isn't.
Exactly right. We're growing and growing. And I know one of the questions we get is, well, why can't you just add more to Issaquah High School or Skyline High School? And the reality is each of those buildings or properties have their own buildable space. They've already been maximized for their size. That's a whole part of the design process. As you mentioned, they already have the amount of portables we can have. And the reality is, even if we could line up 10 more portables at each of them, it doesn't change the size of our cafeterias. It doesn't change the width of our hallways, right? It doesn't change the central core of the building. And frankly, it's not going to change the traffic running past those buildings, which impacts the entire community. And as you know, I think I mentioned in the other podcast, we're already at a 95% usage rate of all of our facilities, the buildings, the theaters, the fields. We're already using those with our own school day, our own activities, and then our youth sports groups in the community, our civic organizations. So we are literally bursting at the seams. And so I think it's really important to say, can't we just add to those other spaces? The answer is no.
And as we wrap up, we've looked at other alternatives, and people can go to watch our board meetings, although they're a little long. But it's important for us to do that due diligence, whether it's a great idea, whether it's a bad idea. And really, my initial impressions on all of those options is that they're not great for students. And they're only temporary Band-Aids. So for me, it is critical that we look forward and think about the future, think about 2035, and what is our district going to look like? We're responsible for that right now. And so looking at that growth, I think for me, my only alternative is really looking at a new high school.
I think that's it. And I hope this was informative, and thank you.